You know, I encounter a lot of people who say that if change is going to come to America, if we're going to have true reform in America, that it's going to have to come from one of the two parties. Because in their mind, after all, we have a two-party system. Regardless that the Constitution never says that, that's what they believe that we have. And that the only way to change the course that our nation is on is that it will have to come from inside, say, the Republican Party, and you have to work your way up and reform from the inside, that you can change it from the inside. And I always make out the point that once you get inside, the system swallows you up and ensures that the reformer never rises to the level where he can ever make any real changes. So while maybe somebody is a true reformer at heart and they go in with the good intention of making real changes, and all the rhetoric speaks to that during their campaign, once they get in there and they try to make a change, they can't work within their own Republican system or the Republican Party, because it's the Republican Party itself from the top down that is suppressing those reforms, because they benefit from being able to spend the money just the way that the Democrats do. There is no difference between the two parties. So to think you can infiltrate one of the parties and somehow change it from the inside, if you can just get enough people in, well, they know from the start you're not going to get enough people in, and if they do get some in, they're going to co-opt some of them and they're going to suppress the rest. The only real change that can be made is change that comes from the outside, because the only game changer that will ever send a real reformer to Washington or the State House is by sending a third party, someone outside of the two major parties. So with that said, I want to take a snapshot from history, from a book called They Thought They Were Free, and it's a man, Milton Mayer, went and interviewed 10 average Germans after the war to kind of see what happened, what was going on their level, that allowed something like Hitler and the Nazi Party to come to power. And out of chapter 14 is a pretty eye-opening chapter. 13 and 14 are real eye-opening chapters. If you haven't read the book, you have to read this book. It's a clear parallel to almost right where we are today, and at least the mindset of the average person. And I just want to read this quote. Basically, it's about men who thought they could change the Nazi Party from the inside. And when they talk here about big men and little men, because those are the terms that are going to be used here in a minute, he's talking about the little men would be your average German, the big men would be intelligentsia or more prominent German, as seen by people in their society. So I'm just going to quote from it right now. And here it says, "With many, it took the outward form of their saying that since National Socialist rule was here and here for a long time to come, they would join it and reform it from within. But to be effective, they would first have to be accepted." And then the man says, "Oh, effectiveness. That I heard from my friend the teacher. For the sake of being effective, he did everything required of him. And of course, he wasn't effective. He knows that now. But then he had hopes of being able to oppose the excesses. Yes, it was always the excesses that we wished to oppose, rather than the whole program. The whole spirit that produced the first steps, A, B, C, and D, out of which the excesses were bound to come. It is so much easier to oppose the excesses about which one can do, of course, nothing, than it is to oppose the whole spirit about which one can do something every day." Now, that is, to me, is a key point. You'll have men around today, men and women, they'll say, look, we don't really we're not opposed to this whole program, but what we want to stop are the excesses. We want to stop the bailouts. We want to stop the bigger spending. We want to stop all these other programs. But the problem is, it's the program itself at all that is causing the problems. You can't just get in there and oppose one little part of the program, because the rest of the program is just as bad. You have to oppose the whole program. You have to oppose the whole party, because the party is all about the program. They work the program. They work the system. The system is not worked for the purpose of helping the average American. It's not worked to keep the budget low. It always increases. Even at a time when the entire world economy is contracting, we have politicians in both parties who are bent on increasing spending. So it's not enough to just oppose some of the excesses. You have to oppose the whole program, because that's how the whole thing stands. It's a whole system that works together, and it's just going to devour you if you try to work from within that system. But the man goes on here. He says, all of my little men oppose the excesses, at least the worst excesses. I said, and the two best of them, the teacher and the bank clerk, blame them on the radicals, who had grown up in the movement when it was irresponsible and attracted the most reckless elements. Yes, said my colleague, shaking his head, the excesses and the radicals. We all oppose them, very quietly. So your two little men thought they must join, as good men, good Germans, even as good Christians, and when enough of them did, they would be able to change the party. They would bore from within. Big men told themselves that too, in the usual sincerity that required them only to abandon one little principle after another, to throw away, little by little, all that was good. I was one of those men. You know, when men who understand what is happening, the motion, that is, of history, not the reports of single events or developments, when such men do not object or protest, men who do not understand cannot be expected to. Listen, if you have eyes open enough to see all these little steps of tyranny that both parties, the Republican and Democratic parties, have foisted on the American people via the Patriot Act, via the NDAA bill, via the FAA bill, with the drones in the skies, all these little acts and laws that they pass form together to create a tyranny greater than we would ever expect down the road. If you can see that development now and you do not protest, you cannot expect the people who don't understand to protest. Because when they see people who they know understand what's going on, when they see that those people are protesting, the people who really don't understand will then join the protest. That's just the way things are. And he continues, how many men would you say understand in this sense in America? And when, as the motion of history accelerates, and those who don't understand are crazed by fear, as our people were, and made into a great patriotic mob, will they understand then when they did not before? What he's saying is this: there is a time for men to stand up and oppose it. Because if you say that what he's saying is you cannot wait until the bulk of the people are stirred up into some patriotic mob, because they didn't understand it before, and when they're filled with fear and filled up with the propaganda of the government, they are not going to understand it then. They are going to go along with the program. They are going to believe whatever the boogeyman is. They are going to take whatever steps necessary that the state says they need to take. They are not going to oppose it at that time. The time to oppose it is at the first, when you first see it happening. You cannot wait. You cannot wait until the situation develops. Because once you are in the middle of it, the great bulk of people will go along with it. You will stand alone opposing it. If you oppose it at the beginning, the rest of the people will follow. It's very important for you to understand that the party will not allow itself to be reformed from within. They have no intention of letting any reformers up through the ranks to make a real difference. They have no intention of cutting any spending. We actually had, I want to illustrate the mindset of these folks. There's a state senator here in Missouri, State Senator Mike Parsons. In a local paper, he was asked about the sales tax being implemented on the state level. His response was that he was afraid that the fair tax would cost the state money. I think somebody needs to grab Mr. Parsons and explain to him that we the people do not exist to provide the state money. But that is the mindset of all these Republicans. Republicans who would call themselves conservative. Their mindset is, we have to take the money from the people because we need it for our budget. It seems to never enter their mind that they're going to have to cut the budget, regardless of who gets angry. Somebody's going to get angry when you make a cut, but it has to be cut. It can't grow forever. And that's the problem. They think it can grow and grow and grow forever, and there will always be money there to fund it. But we're at a time in history when the economy worldwide is contracting. It's not possible to grow. So, in order to find people who understand that, there's a lot of people out there who understand that. Most of them are in third parties, like the Constitution Party. Now, that's a party full of people who want real constitutional reform brought back to their government. They're tired of seeing the same people get elected over and over and over, and nothing changes. We get all the great swelling promises, but when they get there, they don't make any difference. If you send a Constitution Party candidate, somebody outside the big two parties, that is the only way you're going to get any kind of reform. Because that man or woman can go there and shine a light on the corruption that's going on. They can hold both parties accountable. When there's a dirty backroom deal going on between the two parties, it can be exposed. Right now, nobody exposes anything. Everybody sweeps it under the carpet, and things go on as they always have. I mean, believe me, the Republicans and Democrats do not care if you do like the Tea Party and surround Washington waving your signs. They don't care. Now, the Republicans will jump up on the stage and slap each other on the back and take credit for all that. But in the end, they know nothing's going to change. They're quite happy with seeing you in Washington waving your sign. The Democrats don't care about the Occupy. They don't care. You can go out there, camp in the park, wave your sign, get mad at whoever you want to. They don't care. Because ultimately, that doesn't change anything. It doesn't put any pressure on them. Why? Because at the end of the day, on election day, you guys walk down into your voting booth and you vote for either a Republican or a Democrat. And they know this. They believe in their heart that you don't have the courage to vote either one of them out, to vote both of them out. They know for a fact that all they have to do is interject a couple of bogus arguments like steal the vote, split the vote. You know, oh, don't vote for him because you'll cost this guy the election. See, that's the propaganda that keeps the Republican and Democratic parties in power. And they love it, and they both use it. The Democrats will cry about Ralph Nader. The Republicans will cry about Ross Perot, and they'll invoke him anytime you talk about a third party. You will never hear Sean Hannity or any of these other pundits mention a third party without mentioning steal the vote or split the vote. It's been implanted into the voting public's mind at every turn. But you have to come to the conclusion that when banks like Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan or any of these big corporations who got these bailouts, when they're funding both sides, it doesn't matter who gets elected. No matter who gets elected, the next time a bailout comes up for a vote, they're going to get it. They're funding both sides. You're not funding them. Very few people send their representatives donations for to get for their campaign. Very few. And if they do, it's only $25-100. But you have corporations; they're giving tens and tens of thousands, and the average person just can't match that. So the idea that these parties can be reformed from the inside, it's a false idea. It's not going to happen. I mean, you had people right here we just discussed back in Germany, good men, even Christian men. They said, look, we just got to get involved and we'll change it from the inside. We'll just take it over by brute force. But it never happens. Why? Because the time to protest was missed. The time to stand up was when you first saw the beginnings. You have to stand up then. You know, there's another book I was reading called The Gulag of Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. And he was sent to a gulag. He was a political prisoner in Soviet Russia. But when he was speaking about when the arrests first started happening around Russia, that had the people shown up, when they were coming to their apartments and pulling people out and taking them away to these gulags never to be seen again, had the people in those buildings showed up with shovels, rakes, you know, bats and clubs or whatever, and opposed it from the beginning, they would not have had all these arrests and the thousands and the hundreds of thousands who ended up in these, and millions ended up in these gulag camps because of the paranoia of a dictator. And as you read that book, it wasn't just Joseph Stalin. After a while, it was the people in the system, working that system, and knowing that they had to have so many arrests. So they actually made up reasons to arrest people. And they all knew the reasons were phony. But they had to have a certain amount of people. And that after a while, that power, you have this power over people. So after a while, it's not just Joseph Stalin who was the evil man, and he absolutely was the evil man. But the whole system itself was evil, and that evil infected all the members and the people underneath Stalin. It infected every single one of them people. And in order to keep themselves on the right side of the system, they enforced that tyranny on the, I guess you can call them the peasants or the little people, whatever you want to call them, the average person. That's why you cannot try to change. You weren't going to change Soviet Russia from the inside. It had to fall. The communist system had to break apart. You're not going to reform the Republican Party from the inside. You're not going to reform the Democratic Party from the inside. They're never going to let it happen. The money is on the side of the people who don't want it reformed. JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, GM, all these companies are going to pay to fund the candidates who are going to give them the bailout. They're not going to fund the candidates who are advocating for smaller government, more freedom, and lesser restrictions on local or small businesses, because regulations favor big business. Regulations stifle competition, and it favors big business. Drives the little guy out of the market, drives the little guy out of business. You know, Walmart can better handle any regulation than maybe a small businessman can. Name any big company, they have the money and the power now to deal with these regulations. That the regulations they put out there are really only to keep the little guy out of competition. Because the big corporations already own the regulators. You can go down the list from Monsanto, whether it's food regulations, big business, they already own the regulators. Because these big corporations are funding the people who appoint the regulators to their office. There's no way. All these things are calculated. So how do you change it? The only way to change it, the only way it's going to be changed is from the outside. You have to put in somebody else who is not under the umbrella or the wing of these people. You have to send in a truly independent third party, if you like, somebody outside the two-party system. There's many people running across this country in the Constitution Party that fit that bill. There's an entire party of people who have gathered together to get themselves on the ballot to try and take back their country using the process that our founders have left us, the ballot box. It's not dead yet. We can still use the ballot box. But your vote really doesn't count if you're voting for a Democrat or a Republican, because it doesn't matter. They don't care if you vote for either one of them. It makes no difference to the people who have the money, because they own both sides. If you truly want somebody to change something, to change anything, it's going to have to come from the outside. So you're going to have to reach down and dig down in your heart and use the courage of your convictions to vote for somebody outside those two parties. Once you come to the conclusion that they're both the same and that they're both owned by the same money, it really shouldn't be that hard of a decision. You might have to swallow a little pride. You know, we all had that light bulb moment when we realized that it was futile to vote for either party. We all had to come to that conclusion at some point, and there's no shame in it. Swallowing a little pride, okay, yep, I was wrong. I voted for these guys too many times in the past, and they took advantage of me. Well, we've all had to say that. I've said it. Many of the people I know have said it. You have to come to that conclusion at some time. But you can't keep making the mistake, in effect, over and over again by voting and believing for these people, because all they do, every election, is just another opportunity for these people to explain why this time their failed positions or laws or whatever it is they were passing, their failed ideas, are now going to work somehow. Because if you just give them one more chance, if you just vote in one more Republican, this time it'll really work, when it's failed every other time in the past. It's time to change the way we think about the two parties. It's time to change the way that we vote. So I'm just asking you to consider all what I've just said, and you know, kind of do some soul searching. You're going to have to come to a conclusion. If you're going to continue to vote for the lesser of two evils, please understand that all you're going to end up with is evil.